telecoms are basically making money.
There are some hard questions that need to be asked and answered. One of the misconceptions is that telecoms companies make so much money. Yes, you might generate a lot of revenue, but what's the service acquisition cost? The cost of acquiring a customer is huge. A lot of these equipment providers, they're not homegrown companies, they're not paid in naira, they're billed in dollars. The concept of the MVNO can work in Nigeria, but it is for the brave, those that have an installed base. There's a lot of opportunity for the serious players, really serious players, and there's different ways of differentiating your delivery. Let me just give one nugget.
Thank you guys for joining us today on this episode of Venture Valley. This is an episode I've actually been looking forward to for the past couple of months. Getting this guest here, he's actually a top level professional who I feel has driven change and is actually the best person to speak to on this subject matter. And you might wonder, what subject matter are we talking about? And that's the MVNO space, right? And why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because I've seen that this is the age, or should I say the golden age, where technology is going to disrupt the telecom sector. As a matter of fact, the mode of entry has been lowered for players to come and play and serve a certain market. And in order for us to explore this opportunity and understand better this opportunity, I had to find someone who has done it before. Now, my guest today is someone who has done it not just in Africa, but he's done it internationally. He's been a pioneer in birthing MVNOs for the brands like Virgin, for brands like Ntel in Nigeria, and he has spanned across different markets in Europe, in UK, in Nigeria, in Africa, and I feel like, and right now he's actually in the energy space, so I think I'll ask him a little bit about that. But if you are someone who is interested in understanding this opportunity and interested in understanding how this is going to drive the market, I believe this is the episode for you. So before you jump into this conversation, I encourage you to like, share this with someone who you know needs to watch this video because it's going to be an exceptional episode. So thank you for joining us today, and I drive into our conversations today. Welcome, Mr. Ernest. Thank you so much for making out time. I think this has taken months to actually make our schedules align. I appreciate the fact that you could actually make out this morning to meet with me today to discuss this subject matter. I observe it's something that you really, really care about. But before we dive into the conversation, I would like you to introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a bit about your journey and what passions drive you.
Good morning, Elijah. Yes, quite rightly said. This has been a long time coming. Good morning from a cloudy day in VI. My name is Ernest Akinlola, and I've been in the telecom space now for over 22 years, 25 years, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, right? Although I'm, like you alluded to, I'm currently the MD CEO of Bboxx Nigeria, which is one of Africa's biggest renewable energy companies. We can talk about that in the latter stage. But I spent most of my career in telecommunications in the UK and working for the likes of One-to-One, T-Mobile, Lycamobile, Lebara, Virgin Mobile. And during that journey, I pioneered essentially the launch of the first MVNO in the world, which is Virgin Mobile, the first and the most successful, arguably the most successful. So it's in my veins, MVNOs run in my veins, and I'm very passionate about it because it's a greenfield site. It was a greenfield site at the time, and I was really drawn to it. A lot of people discouraged me, but actually, in my career journey, I always like to go to new, creative, disruptive, not proven. I'm fearless in being adventurous, right? So I like doing the unconventional, and so I've been actually a strong proponent about MVNOs in Nigeria since 2014, when I brought a contingent of the executives of Lycamobile to meet with the vice president then at Aso Rock, and we talked about the readiness of the Nigerian market. So it's always been a passion for me. So yeah, I'm drawn to creative disruption. And so that could be in energy, it could be in telecoms. And so telecoms has been rather stayed for a long time now. You know, we've had the four big dominant people running it, the operators. And all of a sudden, after 20 years, there's a massive disruption. I think you call it the fintech era of, um, of
The
telecoms. And
telecom
so,
sector.
yeah, all the lights have now been turned back on again. And there's something creative and disruptive to be achieved. So that's what. So I'm a proponent. I'm passionate. I'm a driver. I have skin in the game. I have experience in the game. And
Wow.
we all nobody has ever done everybody else's journey, and nobody's really done my journey. So I've been keen to impart my knowledge, bits here and there through articles. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I think just to even dive a bit deeper, you mentioned the fact that Virgin Mobile was actually one of the first MVNOs and one of the most successful. I mean, I never
Yeah.
knew Virgin was actually an MVNO, so I actually always thought it was Lebara, like Mint, But before we dive deeper into the conversation, I would like to ask, what is actually an MVNO? For our viewers who are watching for the first time, just looking to discover this topic, what is actually an MVNO, and why
Right.
exactly is it a creative disruption?
Okay. So an MVNO in English is a mobile virtual network operator. Okay, what's that in English? What does that mean to the common man? Basically, it's a concept whereby a brand comes to a mobile network operator and says, I want to launch my service on yours. I want to piggyback off you. I want to leverage your infrastructure and bring a service to certain segments of customers which we believe we can serve better than you currently are. And so that's basically it. So to the end user, it is agnostic. They don't know whether it's an MVNO or not. It's only to industry players that they know that, okay, this is piggybacking off somebody else's network, right? The concept also appears in airlines. So, like, some airlines that you see the name, they're not the ones that own the infrastructure. Also, in the power distribution across Europe, the names you see don't own the network. The grid is the network. So it's the same concept. And why does it matter? Why is it creative disruptive? Let me just use an example, a live example. So if you take the likes of Lycamobile and Lebara, when they launched many years ago, they identified that diasporans in in London and Europe spent a lot of money trying to call abroad using the regular industry players, the incumbents. So they had the technology, the wherewithal to address that segment and give them cheaper international calling. So
Hmm.
each MVNO has a segment that it can service, right? Now, that segment doesn't just come out of thin air. There would be a reason why they can actually address that segment. Maybe they've been working with that segment in the past, right? As in the case of like a mobile, everybody knows they had calling cards, right? And people used to remember those
Hmm.
back in the day when you wanted to call abroad, you dial
Yeah.
17 numbers and then another four numbers before you even dial the telephone number to get a connection. So they had a massive user base, and they said, well, why don't we turn this into a SIM card? And hence, like a mobile was born. And Lebara followed
Hmm.
suit, and GT Mobile followed suit. So we can talk about different segments. So that essentially is what it does. So from the mobile network operator's point of view, what's in it for them? Well, they're not
Hmm.
servicing this segment very well. It's not where their core revenue is coming from. If these guys can do it better than we can, pay us a wholesale revenue for buying our airtime and data, happy days. It's win win win. The customer wins, the MVNO wins, and the MNO wins. So it's been a very successful model. But it didn't start off like it needed somebody to do it first, right? Before
Hmm.
people realize that there's a commercial proposition in this. So I hope
Interesting.
that,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think that simplifies that. I love the way you took it across industries and
yes,
showed the fact that this is not just something about the industry, and also how it's more for the back end structure, but for the
Mhm.
consumer, it's more of the front end. But
Yeah,
in your journey, starting out Virgin Mobile
yeah,
with the whole MVNO structure, what because you touched on some very interesting points, which is the fact that some people are taking advantage of a certain market that they already serve to ensure that they use the SIM cards to serve those markets better, more of a
yeah,
wholesale agreement. Now,
yes.
in your experience with Virgin, what were the how has the landscape changed? Because right now, I mean, recently we also seen that they give out licenses in Nigeria for MVNOs to operate, and I think recently we also heard about the suspension. So, I mean, I don't even want to go into that yet, but why do you think Nigeria or Africa is ready for this, and what has changed since the time you started out with Virgin and now? And do you think this is the best time for this, or do you think we're in a saturated space and MVNOs might not necessarily work?
That's a that's a thesis, but
Yes, I
and
I I, I wanted to load you up a bit. I wanted you to just
wow. Okay,
speak to that.
okay. So I think in order to, I like telling stories. When I say not useless stories, but stories that help bring alive the concepts, right? So let's do a little walk through memory lane. Why did Virgin Mobile exist ever, even in the first place? Well,
Okay.
um, Branson at the time wanted to, Branson, the Virgin Management Limited company is an amazing organization. What they do is they leverage their brand to different businesses. Virgin Airlines, they've had wedding gowns, they've had condoms, they had Virgin Coke at one time, they have
Wow.
Virgin Money, right? So they felt what's the most ubiquitous utility that we can also lend our brand to. They thought, let's do Virgin Mobile. So they went back in 1999. They went to go and speak to the market leaders in the UK, Vodafone, Cellnet. They were doing very fantastic B2B business, right? They weren't interested in doing this MVNO concept. Oh, it's Richard Branson, one of his crazy ideas again. So, blah blah blah. Now they then eventually came to the company I was working for, which was One to One. Now, One to One was the fourth operator to launch. A bit similar to when I joined Etisalat. So Etisalat was the fourth operator. Remember back in the day. Um,
I remember.
so One to One was the fourth operator. Orange had launched. Cellnet and Vodafone were really owning the market. So One to One was looking to gain market share. It
Hmm.
built its network. It had a whole network built across the nationwide. It had some
Hmm.
issues with the network connectivity to the point that at one point it was nicknamed not one to one, but one to none, because you could never get through to anybody. So when eventually Virgin Mobile were turned down by various of the other operators, they came to us and we said, at the time I was head of audit actually. I was doing operational audits and it came onto my table to say, can you assess this opportunity as to whether we should launch a Virgin Mobile brand? And we knew that we had a network and we weren't fully utilizing our capacity of the network. So if we figured that if we got an MVNO, it wasn't called that at the time, but if we got a strategic partner that could address its own customer segment through Virgin Mobile, Virgin Money, Virgin Brides, Virgin Music, Our Price, all the other, that they have an installed base that they could that this thing could actually make sense. And of course, Virgin Mobile, Virgin is a love mark. It's a very highly recognized brand. I think it's in the top 10 most recognized brands worldwide. So
Yeah.
I did the assessment. I wanted us to do it. So, irrespective of what my assessment criteria was, I wanted it to be successful. And it was launched. And then I left audit to become the commercial manager of managing the relationship between Virgin and One to One. And it went gangbusters. It really took
Hmm.
off. It was good for them and it was good for us. Instead of us flying an aeroplane half full across the Atlantic, we're now flying it full across the Atlantic because you're going to spend the same money. The network is a sunk cost. You've spent the money building the network. You need subscribers on that network, right? So
Hmm.
Virgin gave us opportunity. People thought I was mad to leave audit. Everybody just wrote it off, or the other operators, as nonsense. Now, Virgin Mobile didn't come with all of their technology. They didn't have. This is where we have the difference between a thick and a thin MVNO. A thin MVNO, although we call it tier 1 and tier 5 in Nigeria, right? But
Yeah.
a thin MVNO means you just bring your brand, maybe some customer care and sales distribution. That's it. All the technology behind it on the value chain, your billing, your OSS, your BSS, all those elements are done by the MNO. If you look at the other end of the spectrum, like Lycamobile are a thick MVNO. They have distribution, marketing, they have their OSS, BSS, they're deep, they're very deep. The only thing they don't have is a core network, is an intelligent network, is the core, is the RAN, the radio access, which is what the license is. So that for all intents and purposes, they're almost an MNO. And then you get people that occupy in between thin and thick. So the point I made there, Elijah, is this, and the listeners to this program, is the relationship was born out of necessity and strategic decision making. It was good for both parties. Nobody insisted. Nobody forced anybody. It was symbiotically engaging for both companies. Now, you then talk about, and the same thing with, so when all the rest started to do it, Tesco Mobile wins awards all the time. Tesco is like ShopRite, right, in England.
Yeah.
And so, it was born out of necessity. It took 20 years for the UK to have 20 MVNOs. 20 years. It was
Wow.
organic. It was organic. It was curated. It was assessed. Along that line, many failed and many successful. Now, Easy Mobile was Easy, the Easy Group was modeled themselves somewhat in the same way as Virgin Mobile did. They lent their brand to, you had Easy Airlines, you had Easy Cars, Easy Hotels, so there was similar brand licensing sort of company. They launched Easy Mobile also on one-to-one. One-to-one was bought by T-Mobile. And so it became T-Mobile, and it wasn't successful. The post office, and the United Kingdom Post Office also launched on one-to-one, and it wasn't successful. Now you might think the post office, surely they have a massive installed base. So there are some intricacies involved in what makes an MVNO successful and not. It has to be that the business plan was very thought through. You understand the dynamics. You know, and you have a management team that are really focused on its success. Now, you mentioned about Nigeria. So
Yes.
that's what happened before. Now, what has happened in Nigeria is that the model is different. The outcome is the same, but the genesis of the MVNO is very different. In Nigeria, it is mandated that the MNOs will launch MVNOs. The licenses for MVNOs were issued en masse across the different tiers.
I think about 25, right?
43 and counting.
Whoa.
I think there's at least 16 tier 3s alone, okay? Just tier 3 licenses, right? And so entrepreneurs, business people have piled in, they have bought these licenses, and they now have to negotiate wholesale agreements with the mobile network operators. Now, none of the mobile network, I'm just speaking facts here, I'm not saying who's right, wrong. None of the mobile network operators in Nigeria have launched an MVNO before, right? None of the MVNOs have run an MVNO before. So it is expected that 43 and counting, because there could be more, will launch on 4 network operators. And so just think about it as a businessman. I've been a CEO of a mobile network operator in Nigeria. If somebody came to
Ntel.
me and said, I need to launch 10 MVNOs, let's divide it by four, 10 MVNOs. I mean, do you know what type of investment I'd have to do in my network? And are they going to be successful? How do I know that this MVNO is going to be successful? We have a lot to unpack here, Elijah, today because there are some hard questions that need to be asked and answered, right?
Hmm.
So my belief is that the concept of the MVNO can work in Nigeria, but it is for the brave and it is for those that have really got their acts together, those that have an installed base, right? By the law of statistics, 67% of startups fail, right? This is just all startups. And every single MVNO is a
Yeah.
startup, right? So even if you just go on that basis alone, when I say fail, what does fail mean? I'm not wishing anybody to fail, right? But when I say fail means that the business case that you identified when you bought the license, is it going to manifest? Will it be borne out? Yeah, that's the question.
What are key lessons from your
Yes.
Virgin experience about key factors that were necessary for a successful MVNO launch? You spoke
Mhm.
about the fact that they had installed capacity, and you also spoke about the fact that even though it was still early season, some of them still failed. So
Mhm.
what made for that success and what made for that failure, considering that in the Nigerian market, the MVNO space has been more or less mandated. It hasn't
Mhm.
been birthed from a point of innate market demand like it was in the
Mhm.
UK. So what are
Mhm.
the things that need to be present, and what's your perspective around the NCC and bringing about MVNOs now?
So I mean, look, as I mentioned before, I'm very passionate. I'm happy that MVN knows it's a conversation. I'm happy that I've written articles and people have read them, and I've even seen some of the diagrams in my articles appear in companies in technical partners presentations. So so I'm happy that I'm contributing to this debate. I'm happy. Um, Now, the NCC have, you know what it's like. They've been lobbied for years, and eventually the lobbying became successful, right? I know various
Mm.
people that have lobbied, like Mobile came, and it's successful. So I don't think that, I think that what the NCC have done is they've said, okay, they've acquiesced, they've agreed to it now. So they've issued the licenses to the people that have been lobbying them for it. Now, the fact that so many have been launched at one time, have been issued at one time, is something that would be debated and questioned. Because the factor is this: with this, we have a 220 million population, right? Um, and the whole focus is, so everybody talks about our population size as, oh, this is it, you're going to make gold, you're going to have an extremely successful business because in Nigeria, but we're poor.
True.
I'm in the solar energy space, okay, and my target customers is the rural community, Bomashaw, Ofa, in Ukitikupa, all these places. That's where we sell to, and we know that if you don't have the right telemetry and technology to make sure you're getting your payments, people don't have money. They can't afford it. So there's a question about what are these services that the rural community are now going to enjoy. Let's park that for a minute though. But in terms of success factors, right? It's very important. Why was Virgin Mobile successful? I won't just focus on Virgin Mobile. Why Lycamobile super uber duper successful, and as well as like Lebara and several other ones? Because they had a clear vision. That's number one. In the likes of Lycamobile, they were already in the calling card market. So all they did was they pivoted their technology, so that's an innovation for you there, into the SIM card. So there,
Mm.
it was very easy. All of a sudden, instead of dialing 38 numbers before you dialed the telephone number, you could just dial it like it was a normal phone, right? So that's one key thing. So they had skin in the game. They understood what they were doing. They already had switching equipment. In the case of Virgin Mobile, which was very much a lifestyle brand, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
They knew that uh, Branson. Remember the days when Branson would be going on air balloons across the Atlantic, when he would go in a
Yeah.
speedboat across the Atlantic. He's the ultimate publicist. The ultimate
Yes, of the
publicist.
brand.
Everybody wanted to be associated with that brand, right? So it had
Mm.
an extremely high net promoter score, right? And it was edgy, it was fun, it was disruptive, and it was successful. And case in point, there's Virgin Mobiles all around the world. you know, there's Mexico,
Very true.
India, there's Saudi Arabia. So they're always known to be edgy, innovative, fun, and so when you have that drumbeat behind you, with the right team. I mean, the Virgin Management Limited team, that they are top notch. They hire the best. They make sure that they hire the best and people that know what they're talking about, right? These things cannot be understated. Now they knew they cut their cloth according to their size. They knew that they're not into the technology, they're into the brand, the customer experience. Everything is about UX. Everything is about UX. That I was reading recently that Apple is actually now in facing a threat. This is a company that has, I think, over 200 billion in cash revenues, right? Why? Because the device is now no longer going to be the future. We're going into the metaverse. You're going to just, I mean, I'm not an AI expert or anything, but technology is moving at such a pace that would devices be necessary anymore? So yeah, people are asking
Mm.
these questions. So Virgin know what they know, and they stick to their knitting. The worst thing you can do is believe the hype, think that you know everything, and just do Me Too strategy, right? And my concern about the Nigerian context is that very few, I would say only a handful, have really done their homework, understood what their installed base is, know how they're going to launch an MVNO and push it to their base. Right? If you don't have an installed base, what collaborations are you thinking about doing? Very, very important, because you're not just going to launch with brand new MVNO.com and go into the market and come up with something that is going to give you 1-2 million subscribers overnight. Let me tell you why that's unlikely.
Why?
You believe Do you believe in the saying that there are no new ideas under the sun, right?
Yes.
There's no concept that hasn't been done before, right? Now, telephony is a commodity. It is data and it is voice. That is it. Last, when you break it down, that's what it is. So
Yeah.
what is the level of differentiation I can really expect to achieve when, number one, my service quality is predicated on the service quality of the MNO? Number two, there are 42 other people like me that have this license, okay, to varying degrees of sophistication, but they're all going
Yeah.
to be doing data and voice in some way or another. Why is Lagbaja MVNO.com better than Benga MVNO.com and better than Chukudi MVNO.com? Why? What is the level? What are you going to do to differentiate yourself? It's not necessarily in pricing, because if it's pricing, it's just a race to the bottom. I've seen it many times. You just price yourself to the bottom, then you don't have a business case anymore. Massive amounts of marketing trying to establish your own brand, right? A brand new
Mm.
brand, right? So it's going to have to be very curated, very targeted. But I can tell you, I don't even need to talk to anybody. I can tell you that there is a massive overlap of propositions. Everybody's thinking, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go after this segment. I'm going to go after that segment. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to bring I don't want to say anything because, I do support some of them and I do advise a couple of them. Obviously with Chinese walls. But the point is that innovation and differentiation is not just in the service itself. You need to look deeper into your operations to make sure that this gift that we have been given by the NCC, because it is a gift, it's an opportunity to disrupt and to be creative. And if the
Hmm.
hard questions are not being asked, the hard questions, not the easy questions, not the groupthink questions, not patting myself on the back that, yeah, we got this right. No, the hard questions need to be asked. The business case that you submitted to the NCC or that you really want to use to drive your business a year ago, is that business case still valid today?
Hmm.
Naira was 475. Naira is 1,500 today. Inflation is 33%, right? There are many dimensions here, Elijah, that need to be brought into bear into management thinking, into the management teams of each of the MVNOs. You have the MNOs. I mean, everybody should also walk in the shoes of the MNOs. I'm an ex MNO, I'm an ex MVNO, so I'm very qualified to speak here.
Yes.
An MNO is now having to pay at least 60-80% more than what they used to run their networks. Okay? And we have
Hmm.
seen many advocates already in the news say our prices have been capped since 2013. So where's the margin? If I had my
Hmm.
former MNO hat on when I was MDC of Intel, I'd be lobbying that I need to be able to increase my tariffs. If I
Hmm.
can't increase my tariffs, then there's no margin for me to invest into the network that needs to run the MVNOs. Now,
Okay.
a tomato seller is actually in an almost better position because a tomato seller can increase the prices of our tomatoes. And you and I want to eat our stew, so we're going to buy it, right? Irrespective,
Yeah.
right? Everybody else has increased their prices. The MNOs haven't. I'm not advocating that all Nigerians should now start. I'm not saying that they have to pay more and I want them to pay more. Who am I? The point I'm making is this: this is economics. This is business, and you
So
can't invest.
would you say, sorry to cut you there, but would you say I mean, you're speaking about the economics of running an MNO and
Yes,
how that affects the viability of an MVNO, because an MVNO basically thrives on the infrastructure of the MNO. So
yes.
I'm prompted that, and I think the viewers too will be prompted to ask two questions. We've been under the perception that telecoms are basically making, permit me to use the word, blood money or drug money, right?
And rubber.
Because I'm rubber money, yes, and because I mean, in some way, we still, most of the MNOs still operate like MVNOs in a way. What do I mean by that is that they don't typically own all the infrastructure. They have infrastructure partners who support them. They try to keep their assets, their businesses asset light. So, are you saying that to bring in an MVNO will increase the cost of operations of an MNO? And for that reason, because they can't actually charge more, most of the MNOs might not even sign wholesale agreements with MVNOs, and will it affect the ability for MVNOs to operate in the market?
Okay, let me speak as a ex CEO of an MNO, right?
All right.
I won't speak for any CEO of an MNO currently, but
And you could use percentages. You could use percentages if you are speaking about numbers, so that we just
yeah,
keep it.
yeah. So no, I won't even talk about numbers, right? But what I'm saying is, I'm just talking about business economics, right? Now, let me just pick up on one of your points. You said that some of the MNOs are kind of acting like MVNOs. Let me clarify what I think you meant. You're talking about co-location, right?
Yes,
So
co-location. Yeah.
yeah, so there was a time when, a few years back, when the MNOs decided to, uh, instead of running their power stations, and it's not all of them that they leased out. Instead of them running them, the cost of running a base station is very expensive. Diesel, security, it all adds up, right? So so instead of you managing that, they decided to lease them out to the tower co company, three major ones,
Yes.
right? So
IHS
yeah,
and the
well,
rest of
yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. So they've leased them out to those ones, and then what they've done is that then released cash back into them, so they didn't have to spend it. But then they pay a rent to be co-located, but they still own their own HLRs, they still own their own IN and equipment. So then there's still effect, and it's not all of their network that is leased out. You might find in maybe certain key urban areas where like Lagos, Port Harcourt, and Abuja, they've done it there in those densely places. But in other places, they run their own operations. Now, this thing about telecoms making arm rubber money, right? Um, yes, everybody needs data. In fact, somebody drew a diagram once, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And at the bottom was not food or shelter, it was data, right? So, which just show, just goes to show how important data is, right? Now,
Yeah.
there's Nigeria has a lot of misconceptions, right? One of the misconceptions is that telecoms companies make so much money. Yes, you might generate a lot of revenue, but what's the service acquisition cost? The cost of acquiring
Hmm.
a customer is huge, right? The cost of running the network is huge, and inflation has. I mean, a lot of these equipment providers, then they're not homegrown companies. They're not paid in naira. They're billed in dollars. So we're adding
True.
dollars, adding inflation, adding lack of affordability, adding fuel scarcity. You add that all into a running of a. I ran one before. I know what it was like, and it wasn't anywhere near as bad as the situation is here, right? As it is today. So it's great to talk about big top line revenue. What about profit? You've heard about, I think some MNOs that have issued their results, right? Have you seen the drop in profits?
Yes, I
Humongous.
have. I have. I
Yeah,
have.
massive drop in profits. That's not a lie. That's not make believe. And a business doesn't run on revenue. A business runs on profit. It's from the
Yeah.
profits that you reinvest into the network. Now, if you can't reinvest into the network to run your own business, it's going to be challenging to accommodate others, right?
But wouldn't
So
you? But wouldn't you say? But wouldn't you say having the MVNOs as a wholesale customer would kind of reduce the service acquisition costs of running an MNO, considering the fact that you are now a wholesale player and you have
yeah,
you don't have to
that's
bother about certain
yeah.
issues.
Well, here's the thing, right? You need to spend the money first before the MNO even gets one subscriber, right? You can't, so it's like there's a sunk cost that you have to build into the network capacity, right? You have to enhance it because you can't say you're going to sign a wholesale agreement with a tier 5 or a tier 4, which do the aggregation, by the way. We haven't even got into that bit yet. And then say that, okay, well, I tell you what, you launch and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes, and if you're doing well, then we'll invest. And it doesn't work like that because automatically the service level agreements, very very key in a wholesale agreement, the service level agreements, you start to fail against them straight away from day one. So there is going to be capital outlay before you can commence a a mobile an MVNO service, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so these days because there's digitization, there's APIs, etc. But irrespective of that, there will still be a cost outlay. So I'm not saying that because of this the MVNO movement is dead. No, what I'm saying is that an MNO is going to choose the most able MVNO, the most erudite, the most considered, detailed business case, believable business case, right? MVNO, to let you plug into my network. I'm not just going to let anybody plug into my network. That's going to be something that, if it was me, if when I was running an MNO, that's what I would be thinking about. I'd be thinking you can't just plug in. I need to know that you're viable. I need to know that your business case is robust, right? And I
Hmm.
need to know this segment that you're saying you're going to bring for me, that you're going to be able to do it. I want to know why you're able to do it, right? What are you doing differently?
I mean,
Yeah.
from the number of MVNOs that were given, right? I mean,
Yes.
40 something licenses and counting. So that's
Yes.
basically, if we divide it by the number of MNOs that exist, that's basically about an average of 10 MVNOs per MNOs, assuming they were all equally spread out, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that means an MNO would have to invest, should I say, 10 times what they are currently investing in their network. I don't know if that's how the maths work, right?
No, I don't think it's linear. It's not linear. But it wouldn't be linear. But you'd have to build some
So it's
capacity.
marginal.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a marginal cost that you'd have to, invest in. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not tech. I'm not. If I spoke to my former CTO, he'll be able to tell me. But but it's not a doubling, because you have to. But you'd have to enhance your HLR capacity. In HLR, the home locator records, they maintain all of
Yes.
the SIM numbers. You'd have to expand that, and they're replicated across every part of the network. So you there will be a cost outlay, definitely.
Okay.
And this
So
doesn't mean an MNO would not find an MVNO attractive. It means that an MVNO seeking to sign a wholesale agreement needs to have done its homework, needs to convince an MNO. Let me be me, as former MD. Uh, I would need to be convinced that you're going to be able to
mm,
deliver this. I will drill through your numbers. So before an MVNO approaches an MNO for a wholesale agreement, they experts to look at it with them, um, to look at it for them, to distill down into the numbers, build the affordability. Nobody wants to redo their business case on 1,500 naira, but you have to. You have to.
okay, so I mean, basically, from what I've gotten, it's more like a partnership between the MNO and the MVNO coming together to um, actually penetrate the market. So it's not just
Yes.
take, I've sold to you, go and do whatever you want with it. So there's a certain level of partnership and investment required from the MNO with the MVNO. But
Yes.
looking at what recently came out in the news, right?
Mhm.
The NCC suspending suspension of new MVNOs in Nigeria, and one of the things they cited was market saturation and
Mhm.
competition, as reason for the suspension. So, in your view, do you think there were too many MVNO licenses given out? What do you think about what does that mean? Because really, we've not really seen any MVNO take off yet in terms of full market penetration, and then we're already hearing this. Do you think the NCC made a mistake? Do you think the MVNO should be scared right now? Considering all this kind of news that you're hearing uh, from the regulators within the market.
I mean, look, if I was an MVNO license holder, I would be concerned. Well, I'd be concerned that I have so many competitors, right? I'd be
Yes.
concerned. That's one. So that's the angle that I would come at this from. I'd say I have a lot of competitors, and how do I differentiate myself? That's what will be number one on my mind. Not I won't be obsessed with first mover advantage. I want to talk about that actually because I think first mover advantage is it's a double edged sword. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily the best thing. Um, in terms of, do I think that NCC made a mistake in issuing these licenses? Like I said, they were lobbied. People wanted them. The people had lobbied for them. So I don't know. I only know a handful of the MVNOs, but I don't know what the business cases were that were submitted to the NCC to convince them. I mean, that's not my purview. That's their purview, and they have experts in the NCC that would have assessed each and every single business case on the basis of, okay, this is valid, and of course these business cases exist, and they compare them. So So I wouldn't be able to say whether they made a mistake. But all I would say is that they, nobody would have gotten through the door without something that was viable. The onus is on the entrepreneur, is on the businessman or the or conglomerate or the group that have bought the license. The onus is on them. Whether it's 43 or 51, it's still a lot. Nigeria is big, right? But how are you going to slice up your area? What's the level of your ambition? I mean, personally, I think that there's going to have to be some sort of the way. You asked me a question at the very beginning, which was, where do I see this going in the long run? And I think there's definitely going to be some consolidation, and there's going to be some more partnerships and collaboration amongst the MVNOs, which is why I said this first mover advantage. I hear through the grapevine here and there that everybody wants to launch first. Launch smart, launch considered. Don't necessarily launch first, because you might end up just doing market survey for your competitor, right? You know, yes. Now we've seen many examples of it. Do you think Netflix was the first one that came out like that? It wasn't. There was another company. They
No, they
raised 200,
weren't. Yeah.
raised $200 million, but they just did market survey for Netflix. You know. Anyway,
Yeah.
won't talk too much about all these things. But so my point is that the MVNOs that have an installed capacity, maybe they have a sister organization that they know they can offload to. They're the ones that are going to really grow, because they've got a captive audience. Lycamobile had a captive audience. Virgin had a captive audience. Those are the two that I know so well because I've worked in all of
Virgin
these
had a
ones. But
captive audience.
yes, they did.
Oh,
I told
really?
you.
How?
Yeah, they had customers through Virgin Money, customers through Virgin Atlantic, customers through Virgin Mates, customers through Virgin
Oh,
Cola.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh, that's what you meant. Okay.
they had a Virgin community.
Oh,
So
okay. I get it.
it's so easy. I mean, I fly Virgin. Whenever I'm on Virgin, I get points from my Virgin card. I have a Virgin credit card. And when I get points from it, I use them from air miles. So they create this symbiotic relationship between all the different verticals that they have
Like an
licensed.
ecosystem.
They've created a community. I like the word ecosystem, yes. But ecosystem is more around, and ecosystems are more where one part is enabling another part. Yeah, and I guess you could say
Yeah.
that this is more of a community. There's no real business between Virgin Money and Virgin Atlantic. But because they're part of the Virgin community, you can do loyalty points and all that. There's Virgin Experience. So that's what they do. So they had a captive audience. Now,
I
of all
see.
the MVNOs here today, of the 43, how many have a captive audience? How many have an installed base? I don't. I know some do. I don't know most. I don't know most. I only know maybe a handful, you know? But I just hope that everybody is being honest with themselves as entrepreneurs. This is not about the NCC, because the NCC didn't put a gun against anybody's head. Oh. You know, they made it available. They made it available, and people applied.